So Jason, you and I were talking the other day about smartphones we've used over the years and how much they changed. So today, let's dive a little bit deeper into smartphone nostalgia. I'm Jason Cipriani with Jason Perlow. This is Jason Squared. And let's reminisce a little bit, Jason. So going back, what was your first phone? Not smartphone, but just first cellular wireless phone that you used?
You know, I had to really think about that one because that's such a long time ago, because we're talking right after I got out of school. 87, 88, 89 is when I decided to get my first one, working in the professional realm, consulting in Manhattan on Wall Street in the computer industry. That probably was the original Motorola flip phone, the MicroTac, right? Which came before the StarTAC.
Not the StarTAC.
The MicroTac was like a small brick-sized device. It was like about this big, and part of it on the bottom would flip out so that you got the microphone piece to reveal the keypad. And it was back when, if you whipped one of these things out in public back in 1989, people thought you were someone like really important, right?
Yeah, you're part of the government agency, right?
You were either a rich Wall Street banker, you were, back in the day, Donald Trump, we know when he was a giant real estate magnate in New York City, would whip around that same model. This is, the thing couldn't text. It had numbers on the display that were like lit up with like these bright orange, I would call them LEDs, like you would see on an old clock radio, when the numbers are formed by these little lights, essentially.
Yeah.
But it was liberating to be able to go out in public and take phone calls without having to go to a phone booth or without having to go into your desk in an office building. So it was the first time I was freed from my desk for anything. And it was fantastic.
Yeah,
I had to carry an extra battery with me. That's when you could swap these big brick batteries out. But, it was, I had my attaché case I would lug around.
I remember the brick phones had the car charger, which was effectively a battery that you slid onto the back, and the battery was just constantly powered for the brick phone in your car. And then when you wanted to get out, you had to take the battery off and put your battery, portable battery back on to go. I remember seeing those growing up and just laughing at how ridiculous it was. You had to change batteries. But my first phone, I don't remember the exact model number. I know it was an Ericsson. It was probably in 95 or 96. I was a freshman in high school, and I was like the only kid in school with a cell phone. And from that day on, I've been obsessed about mobile technology and mobile phones. But it wasn't a flip phone, but it had a lid that covered the keypad that you can use to answer a call or hang up.
Right.
And there was, unknown to me, a 1-second delay when you close the lid of the audio still going before the phone would actually hang up. So if you said goodbye to someone and you flip the lid, they can still hear the next second of whatever's going on. And it got me in trouble quite a few times with my mom, yelling something I shouldn't after I hung up the phone, not realizing it was a lot later that she called me out on it and let me know that was what was going on. And it didn't have text message. It was in the menu. It was all there. Europe by then had SMS and was using it like crazy. Japan was using it like crazy. But my carrier at the time, VoiceStream, which is now T-Mobile.
Oh, yeah, VoiceStream. I remember VoiceStream.
Yep, absolutely. VoiceStream.
Wow.
They did not support SMS at the time. I think Sprint might have been getting ready to support it. I don't remember exactly. But I used to try to send SMS messages all day long, hoping that, hey, maybe they'd flip the switch.
This was like 0.5G or 1G technology or something like that. It was,
yeah, I mean, you were lucky to get a message through once it finally did launch.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's basic phones. What about your first smartphone?
So I don't know if you, by today's standards, can call it a smartphone. Okay, it was a Qualcomm Palm OS-based device, the PDQ 800, which I believe was released in 1998 or 1999, depending on where you decide to read about it. It had maybe 2G of radio connectivity on Verizon CDMA, because that's how Qualcomm got its start with CDMA technology and Verizon. It would barely meet the parameters for what we would call a smartphone today. It could run Palm OS apps. It had a wireless email client and web browser. It supported the TCP/IP stack on Palm OS, which is I'm talking about the original Palm Pilot Palm OS, the black and white
Yeah.
screen. Motorola 68,000 base processor running at, I don't know, like 20 megahertz or something ridiculous.
At nothing.
It was super primitive. You couldn't even sync it wirelessly to a computer. It required a dock, you know, with the USB port.
Yeah.
But it was the first device where I could take, you know, I could send and receive emails. You know, it was very expensive service to do, so I don't even know if I had that turned on all the time. Maybe I had it for a few months in testing mode, but it was not. It was pretty damn primitive for a smartphone.
And I think then data plans were measured in megabits, right?
So yeah, it was like, crazy. It was crazy expensive, Jason.
It was like a 10 megabit plan for $20 or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And that sounds like nothing now, but that was actually kind of hard to go through back then, right? Like, because the throughput was so slow and you didn't want to download files or do anything. You basically were sending text emails, receiving calendar invites, and that was it. So 10 megs, you know, went a long way at the time, but it was still crazy expensive. I actually had a couple of those Palm devices without cellular, and that was kind of what turned the gears in my head towards, wonder if a cell phone can do this. And so I used those around the house. And I remember the first time we set up a Wi-Fi network and being able to send an instant message on Yahoo Messenger from the other room and not tied to my computer. I thought it was the craziest thing and the coolest thing in the world. Eventually, I found myself with a Sidekick 2, which was at the time a smartphone, and realistically would still be today if Danger was still around and producing the Sidekick. But it had this swivel display that would fly up and reveal a full QWERTY keyboard underneath, and on each side it kind of was like a Nintendo Switch, right? It
was a very cool science fiction-y looking device for the time. Yeah. I will have to say that.
You could hold it up and talk on it. It was really big, not as big as smartphones nowadays. At least I don't remember it being that big, but the screen swiveled up. You had the QWERTY keyboard and you had navigation buttons on the side, but it had a full app store. This was well before the Apple and Android, you know, iOS and Android were a thing. So it had a full app store. People could upload apps and they were quality apps. And man, that thing really changed my view on just being connected at all times. The fact that I could browse the web, albeit on a 2G connection, and look up stuff while I was out and about completely changed how I looked at phones going forward. And mind you, I sold phones all through high school. You know, after I got my first phone, I started selling phones. I worked in an indirect.
I had a side gig with that as well. Yeah, that's interesting. That and pagers.
Yeah, we didn't sell pagers. We sold, it was an indirect store. So we sold from multiple carriers, you know, any carrier that had service in our area, we covered or sold. And so we bounced around quite a bit on phones. I've, you know, owned hundreds of phones over the years, easily. And so, you know, it was that Sidekick 2. I seriously wish that Danger had not, you know, gone the way it did and they had stuck around, because I would love to see what they would do with technology now. They had an outside of the box thinking and approach to their phone then, and to be able to have the technology we have now, I would love to see what they would do. Or hey, someone recreate the Sidekick. You know,
I have a few stories about what happened after Microsoft bought it. It was apparently the back-end infrastructure that ran Danger was a mess. It couldn't be modernized in any way. And when it crashed, they lost all their data. There was no way they were able to recover it.
I remember when it crashed. I was no longer a Sidekick user at the time, but I do remember when it crashed. And, you know,
yeah, that company didn't put any investment in modernizing their systems architecture, which is why they went under, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is unfortunate, because like I said, it was a really great product to use. I won't bore you with all the war stories of Sidekick.
So our first love is always the most, man. You know.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I found Howard forums and went down rabbit holes and made tremendous friends from that people I still talk to today. So although my love for the Sidekick 2 is there, it's not my favorite smartphone I've ever used. But Jason, and I'll get to mine in a second, I want to know what yours is first.
Well, mine is probably the same as yours. It was the BlackBerry. Okay, it would have been the 72 series BlackBerry. No, the 62. It's one of the BlackBerry Boulder Pro or whatever it was. You know, in that time frame, classic BlackBerry operating system. It was the first product, okay, that allowed me, and this is, we're talking, you know, mid 90s or something like that. It was the first product that really allowed me to be able to not be at my desk all the time to deal with emails. When I was working on Wall Street, in the World Trade Center area, it was my very first mobile collaboration work tool. I mean, on Wall Street, in banking environments, in IT, emails were absolute king. Okay, it's where I got all my network alerts from servers and everything, and other notifications from on. Then exec says, "Hey, my box is broken. Go fix it." I had calendar capability with earlier devices, right, the Palms, but this was really the first to do wireless sync of mobile calendar data from the desktop, instead of having to do that whole docking thing that was required of previous devices before. Now that I really think about it, the BlackBerry is what really turned me into a device addict. I'm not sure that my life is now better because of it, but
Right.
it's able to allow me to, instead of being stuck at this desk, right? You know, I was able to go out to dinner with my wife. I was able to do other things. And if something came across, I could triage and say, okay, this is something I need to go take care of immediately, and pull my laptop out and, you know, go do it. Or, all right, I could just say, right, okay, we'll deal with this later. And that's how our lives work now, is triaging information and determining whether when to act on it. The BlackBerry was the very first to do it. And again, its applications were basic. It was email and calendaring. And later on, BlackBerry had an app store where there were, you know, it had Twitter, it had Facebook, it had, you know, a couple of little things. But the main function was email and calendaring was king on that device. But I wouldn't know if I would call the BlackBerry my favorite smartphone. Okay, I think my favorite is got to be the iPhone 5.
Really?
The 5S. In many ways, that is the iconic, you know, 5-inch pocketable smartphone design.
Yeah, interesting.
After that phone, I think every iPhone has been very much iterative industrial design, right? They've all been sort of based on that, you know. It was also my very first iPhone, because it was the first that I switched to off of BlackBerry, and also having a very brief stint with Motorola's first Droid ever. And again, I've always had Androids and stuff for testing devices, but in terms of my daily driver, right, that iPhone was my first daily driver iPhone. After that, you know, everything just got so much bigger. The phablets came and stuff. Now, maybe it was out of necessity. My eyes got worse. I got older. I needed to look at more complex data on a device. But it was freeing to have such a small device that could do so much that you could just pop right in your pocket, right? Yeah. To me, that was the iPhone. It was the iPhone, in my opinion.
So for as much as the iPhone has changed the industry, there's no arguing that. It's well established that the Apple's iPhone turned the smartphone industry, or this wireless industry, on its head. It is not a single one of them is my favorite smartphone.
Okay.
It would have to be the BlackBerry 7290, and at least I believe that was the model number.
Yeah,
and
they had a lot.
It was a blue-ish phone, but it was also the first BlackBerry I had that had a color display. Everything up until that point, and I'd had BlackBerries well before that, were all black and white or grayscale. And so anything you did was, you know, it looked okay, but it also looked old at the time. You know, Windows Phone or Windows on mobile or whatever it was called at the time was out, and it was colorful and bright. I had just come from a Sidekick that had a great looking display, but BlackBerry, the always on connectivity, the instant email, all of that was drawing to me. So I went to it, and then the BlackBerry 7290 came out, and that color display, for whatever reason, I was just drawn to it, with the always on email service, the Biz, BlackBerry Internet Service, and I even managed my own Bez server for my own personal use, even though I had zero reason to do it. I had to manage my own server. But that always on connectivity and instant email. And I remember being out somewhere one day, bidding on stuff on eBay, something that I had wanted for years, winning or bidding on it, getting an instant email notification that I had been outbid, and then being able to go back and bid on it and win it. And my friends were like, what what did you just do? How did you do that? And I was just, that was it. That I was sold on BlackBerry from that point going forward. And it just, that 7290 changed everything for me with smartphones.
Jason, do you miss having BlackBerry thumb? Remember, right? When we used to like do
wheel,
this
yeah.
and that little thing, you know, you click and you would just like subconsciously, even if you were not using the phone, if you were holding, you were just kind of like, I found myself even not holding my phone, kind of just, I don't know if you can see this action, but it's that thing that you would do to scroll through messages and stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The scroll wheel on the side of the BlackBerry.
I love that thing.
For people who don't know, I mean, there's some people who likely don't. It had a scroll wheel on the side, and that's how you navigated the phone. You could hold in Alt to go sideways. Otherwise, it went up or down. And
they weren't touch screens for the most part.
Yeah, no touch screens until later with the BlackBerry Storm, which we're not even going to go there.
No, that was a weird device. We don't talk about those things, Jason.
Yeah, not at all.
We don't talk with outsiders about that.
Yeah. So. And maybe perhaps the reason I hold BlackBerry so near and dear is because of my love for BlackBerry devices. I helped start a website called berryscoop.com, and that's how I started writing and got into tech journalism. It was originally just going to be a hobby and something to do to get free phone cases, because at the time that's what I thought was needed to be done. And 12 years later, here I am, lucky enough to freelance for quite a few outlets and have freelance for many outlets over the years. And so there's a lot of nostalgia with BlackBerry for me. But yeah, so let's kind of dive into whether or not, if you had one way or one wish to change the history of smartphones and, kind of level the playing field now for all the companies, what would you change?
Well, I mean, it's probably two different things, but I mean, this opens up a lot of wounds, right? The things of what could have been, right? Palm, okay? This is the platform and company that could have had everything. That company had so much great internal talent, and many of those people went off to companies like Apple and such, and Google with Android, okay? So the talent wasn't wasted, but the Palm OS platform would have continued to evolve. The people there could have created such a vibrant platform, especially if you see what they did with, the Palm, what that thing is, that stone thing, the second or third generation Palm device with WebOS.
Yeah.
But the company had so many missteps, so many failed attempts at things. So many companies owned it in terms of the Palm technology, and the company itself as a parent. It got passed around way too many times. If HP hadn't purchased the company in 2010, it's very hard to say what would have happened. Otherwise, the company was already having financial issues. In an alternate future, I would have liked to see maybe Apple buy them or Google and adopt some of that technology for the things that they have.
Sure.
There was solid technology and things there. But I also think that Microsoft could have had much more influence in the market if it had been much more serious about Windows CE in the mid-2000s and responded to the iPhone threat much more aggressively in 2007, rather than completely, dismissing it like Steve Ballmer did.
Everyone dismissed it.
Windows Mobile 8 was just way too late in the game to make any kind of difference. The Nokia purchase was a massive waste of money and effort. But at the same time, Microsoft learned a very hard lesson. And they're a very formidable applications developer for both iOS and Android now. And I think we all want to see what they have in store for Surface Duo and other devices going forward.
I can't wait to see
I cannot wait to see what they do. And I'm also not sure we would have ended up with Satya Nadella. I am also not sure if we would have ended up with Satya Nadella as CEO and all the progressive things the company has done since the Nokia thing hadn't happened. I think we would have still be living with bad old Microsoft now instead of good Microsoft.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said there about the turnaround we've seen since Windows Mobile failed with the company. It was kind of a wake-up call for them, and realistically, Microsoft has made great strides in the last few years in hardware and software. You know, even the fact that they're adopting Android to power their mobile devices, their mobile hardware devices, is a huge leap forward, and something I look forward to testing, like you just said. As for me, one thing I would change would be BlackBerry. I still would love for them to be around. You know, there's a story going that, you know, the two co-CEOs at the time when Apple announced the iPhone laughed and said it would be a failure, and were very arrogant about what had just been announced, kind of like Microsoft was holding a funeral for the first
Yep.
iPhone. We have seen those internal videos. I wish the arrogance wouldn't have happened, or at least wouldn't have persisted as long as it did. You know, even all the way leading up to BlackBerry releasing their tablet, the Playbook, after the iPad had launched, all of it was a joke. Every single product, and you know, the Storm, we'll talk about that. That was their answer to the iPhone. All of those products were so rooted in arrogance and the belief that they were untouchable because they were the market leader, that
Yes.
they weren't willing to adopt and adapt to the changing landscape and see
Yep.
the future.
And what lesson did we learn, Jason, is that not invented here philosophies often kill products and companies.
Perfect. Yep. Yeah. I've never heard it put like that, but that's exactly it. And I used to write for Berry Scoop about the arrogance that was going to kill BlackBerry, and unfortunately, it eventually did, because they just could not see what the future was really going to be, even though it was apparent to everyone else, even Google with Android. So short and sweet, BlackBerry. I wish they were still around. Maybe not making devices, but at least having their own operating system and putting it on some killer hardware, even though they've tried that with their Android spin, but that's a whole nother story as well. Any closing thoughts?
No, I think this is a good walk in memory lane, and just to show how the industry has advanced in the last, I'm going to say, 20 years since we started seeing these technologies emerge. And who knows what we're going to see 20 years from now? You know, whether we're even going to be walking around with devices, or if we're going to have things attached to our heads, or whatever, or glasses, or any of these things that are coming out. It's hard to say what's coming down the pike, but I look forward to having this discussion with you in 20 years, Jason.
Yeah, it'd be a lot of fun. I say it all the time. I've probably said it to you before. I'm really jealous of my kids and the fact that they get to grow up with all of this technology, and the fact that their lives are going to ultimately change over the next 20 years. And hopefully they'll have that same feeling for their kids when they're my age. But yeah, I would love to hear what some of our listeners and viewers think about their old smartphones, their favorite phones, their first phones. So make sure to leave us a comment and let us know. Let's all take a trip down this memory lane together. I'm Jason Cipriani.
And I'm Jason Perlow.
This is Jason Squared. Make sure to check out more of our work at zdnet.com.